Spring is just about here now. So let's call it spring, shall we? I mean, it is spring. Even though you may not feel that way and the weather may not reflect it, of course, all of the climate change and global warming, of course, makes that very clear. But one thing that's also clear is that the Politicrat Daily Podcast store has the Spring Spectacular Collection. All of the t-shirts, all of the sweatshirts, long t-shirts, mugs, hoodies, beanies, hats, pens, mugs, and so much more. Tote bags. I could go on. And new items added every day and all designed by yours truly, Omar Moore. I have to say, there is also a brand new t-shirt and sweatshirt and long sleeve shirt that you'll be able to find on the Politicrat Daily Podcast store. It's called the Public Life, Private Life Collection. It's actually the Public Self, Private Self collection, based on an idea that I raised on a podcast episode earlier this year about whether your online persona is the same as your real life persona. And so based on that idea, I created a t-shirt that expresses that idea, but does it in a way that I think is stylish, provoking, thought-provoking, and perhaps maybe a little bit uncomfortable. You can't really live a great life if you don't have a little discomfort in it. For all the right reasons, I should say, for sure. Come now, come one, come all, to the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store right now. Buy and support this great podcast store. I'm really, really proud of it, as you can tell. Go to the-politicrat.myshopify.com right now. Thank you. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, March the 19th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, a look at power, a look at life, and a look at us. Putting it all together with reflections over the past day or two about what has been going on here in the United States and abroad. A compilation, if you will, of this week. All of that coming up next. That was Najee with Personality. And welcome back on this Friday. This is the last full day of spring, by the way. I should tell those of you who may not be aware of that. Friday, March the 19th. My goodness me, it's hard to believe. I said the last day of spring. I meant to say the last day of winter. This is the last full day of winter. It may well be winter in some people's hearts, though, because it's been very, very difficult these last few months for so many people around the world, really trying to cope with a lot of the challenges that life has brought them and these situations in life bring. I just really think it's important to keep reflecting and remembering this, because there are some of us who are fortunate, some of us who are thriving and doing very well, thank you very much, and all those kinds of things. And we have to stay connected to people who aren't doing well, who aren't doing, faring as well, who are going through some things. I think that makes us a better world. I don't think what makes us a better world is that we are so much better, some of us are so much better off in terms of finance or whatever it might be than others. It's what makes us a better world is that we start to care about everybody. That's what makes us a better world, because then if we start to care about everybody, then we can try to start to help some people. And if we can start to do that, we become a more caring, compassionate society, and we become a stronger society. So I reflect on things like that on this day and every day as we, as I say, in our final full day of winter. Spring comes about at 2:37 in the morning, Pacific US time, which is 5:37 in the morning, Eastern United States time, on Saturday morning, March 20th. So that is something to look at for those of you who like the change of season, and those of you who do not like winter, because there are a lot of people who do like winter. They love the snow. They love the rain, although rain can fall at any time in any season. California doesn't have a season. California does not really have. One thing you realize when you live here in California is that California really doesn't have any defined seasons weather-wise in terms of the spring. Everything is interchangeable. I mean, the temperature may get a little cooler depending on where you are in California at various times of the year. In San Francisco, I mean, you wouldn't know whether it was summer or winter, because as Mark Twain once said, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. And he was not off at all. He was not far off. He was absolutely right. It does get very cold here at times in the summertime, particularly in August, I would say, is one of the cooler months. It gets into the low 50s here and during the day. And you have to be wearing a blanket, a really warm coat sometimes here if you're not careful. And with this climate and global warming and climate change, forget it. So, that's the story here on the seasons changing. So enjoy winter. Those of you who love the winter, this final full day of winter is here today. And so reflections, I think today's episode is going to be a lot about reflections, about thinking about what's happened these last few days, and also adding some news stories to that. So that's really where we are today, what I'm going to be doing today, I should say. And I want to start off with talking a little bit, just briefly actually, about the phenomenal guest I had on here yesterday. If you haven't yet listened to my conversation with Natalie Collins, if you've not yet listened to her, please do. It was just yesterday, Thursday, March the 18th, 2021, that she was on, and we had a really, I think, very edifying conversation. And she was the one really who provided some very, very key insights and a real education she brought around gender violence and around the attitudes that people have. I thought that, a lot of the things that she had said were very valuable. All of them were. And some of those things I certainly, when she talked about how people enable, that's something that I know people who have talked about that very same thing, and so through them, I was certainly aware of that. I think the things that were really powerful about what Natalie was saying yesterday was the situation regarding the little things that people do every day. And those are little things that people do that they can decide either to say that someone is an abuser or say, oh, no, he's a nice guy. That is the kind of thing. And you see this every day. We saw this with people in power, white men particularly in power, but black men and any other kind of men in power, right? When someone in power is accused or is questioned, a man in power, the someone being a man, and a friend gets up there and says, oh no, he's never abused, he's never raped anybody, he was really nice with me and he treated me nicely at all times. I remember all of those women who said, oh no, Brett Kavanaugh was really a great guy. Remember that? And when Natalie Collins yesterday was talking about the people in the your everyday life who say those kinds of things after, let's say, a person, yourself or someone else, has been attacked, abused, and someone, your friend or someone in your family says, oh, he seems so lovely. Or, a friend of yours, says, oh, he seems such a nice guy. And that dismissal of, even if they're not directly dismissing the abuse that you have had happen to you, they are dismissing it, aren't they, by proxy, when they say, oh, he's such a nice guy, and then don't care to even get into whether or not you were abused. And that happened with all of these men in power, like Brett Kavanaugh. All these women were trotted out. Pardon my French, trotted out. But you understand what I mean. They were all put up there. I really don't have any other word to say to express that, but you absolutely know what I mean, dear listener. They were all put out there. Every word I say, it gets worse, doesn't it? There were a number of women, let's say it like that, who came forward or wrote letters and signed on to statements that said, oh, Brett Kavanaugh, I've known him for 20 years and he's never once put a foot wrong. He's never touched me. He's never done this. He's never done that. And that is always offered as some kind of trampling. I mean, those women may not be doing that intentionally, or it's not even the intent. They may not be doing that. They may not be explicitly saying, well, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford is a liar. But when they say that Brett Kavanaugh never did anything to me, by implication, not only are they supporting Brett Kavanaugh on the explicit level, but by implication, they are designed to cast doubt on Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's accounts of all of those things, the awful things that Brett Kavanaugh and other men were doing, other boys were doing when they were in I think it was in college. And there was all of these things about him in school, in college, where he had this reputation. And these things he signed in yearbooks and all this kind of stuff, it was well known. So even if you've got 25 women who come out and say, well, Brett Kavanaugh's never treated me well, never treated me badly, a Freudian slip, it doesn't mean that he didn't treat Dr. Christine Blasey Ford badly back in the 1980s. Two things can be true at once. I know that's a rather tired and hackneyed phrase, right? Two things can be, but it's true. Two things can be true at once. And so that kind of refutation does isolate. It's an isolating mechanism. And that's something that I had put to Natalie, and Natalie had certainly said that as well. But that was the thing that Natalie talked about, that choice that each of us has to make, that when someone in our circle who we love and care about, a friend, a family member, spouse, whomever, comes up to us and says, well, I hope certainly as a spouse that people have never said, well, oh, he's such a nice guy. But the point is that when someone comes up to them or comes up to you or when someone comes up to you and says, well, this person raped me or abused me or harassed me, that choice that you can make to either say, oh, he seemed like a really lovely guy, and not have to do any work at all, and just dismiss it and brush it off because maybe you don't want to go there, in quotes. And the there being, I don't want to explore that this guy really could be a monster. Versus saying to the person who says that they were abused, well, I believe you, I'm with you, and I have some soul searching to do because that person that you talked about as being this abuser was my best friend or is my best friend. And so now I'm going to have to do some work to deal with this, to deal with the accusation and what that means and your pain and your hurt. But also, I should say not but, I should say and, conjunctive, and confront my responses to this and also confront this person who I thought was a really good person. This man who I thought was a good person. And so that work is the thing that I think that Natalie hit on and did, again, it was profound to me, actually. I mean, it's not that I was completely ignorant of that, but I really thought that, speaking of reflections, that was a really big thing. And, I've always believed survivors, that's something I can, not trying to toot my horn. I'm saying that I've always done that, even when I was far younger than I am now. Because, that's, I just don't think that people make those things up. There's always the one case here or there. But I'm telling you, when a woman or a girl is saying this, they're not lying. I'm telling you, they're not lying. Like I say, there may be one case here, one case there in a blue moon. But I'm sorry for people, even for me, to be saying there's one case here and there. I mean, this is happening every second of every day, where girls and women are being attacked violently. It's baked into the culture. It's baked into the systemic apparatus. It's about toxic masculinity. It's about all of these things. And I really was really grateful to have Natalie Collins on to talk about all of this. And so I really do hope that you take a listen to that episode if you haven't, because it's such an important episode. And I hope that the men who are listening to this, please listen back to that conversation. Because this is the road, this is the education that we all have to do in some ways. Because we have to be educated about these things. And I think the other thing is because, again, you've got all these other powerful men in the news. Of course, I talked about it this week, earlier in the week, with the HBO docu-series, Allen versus Farrow, and, Mario Cuomo, the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who is the son of Mario Cuomo, who has since passed away. But Andrew Cuomo, who is currently the New York State governor, he looks like he's going to survive. He's going to stay in that post. And I predicted as such. And I'm sure many of you felt the same way, that he was probably going to survive, even though he should not be there. And I think that, and there have been more and more stories coming out about him. There's one, and I'm going to put a link to this as well as the one I promised to do the other day, Rebecca Traister. It was a long article in New York Magazine, and I'm sorry that I didn't link it. I simply forgot, quite frankly. But I will link that into today's liner notes. And it's a really good, long, detailed article. You've got to read Rebecca Traister. I will put that in the liner notes of the episode for today, and also this particular story, also from New York Magazine, as written by the former reporter under Cuomo, the former reporter in Albany with Mario. I keep saying Mario Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo, his son, Andrew Cuomo. Jessica Bakeman wrote a really compelling an important story about her own first-hand experiences being harassed and abused by the governor, Governor Andrew Cuomo. I'll just say Andrew, by Andrew Cuomo. Abusing her and doing it in public. This is public humiliation, and this is about power. This is about power. It's got nothing to do with sex. Nothing. It's about power, and it's about violence. And that's the thing. And Natalie and I didn't get to talk about that so much yesterday. But I hope that people realize that this has got nothing to do with sex. It's got everything to do with power and violence and control and how men exert that. And Natalie did touch on that kind of part of it, the isolation and the cutting people off from family members and cutting people off from friends. And I'm sorry, by the way, at this point, if this is becoming triggering, because this is something that I know that people listening to me have experienced. Some people have. And I say I know. I don't know that empirically for a fact, but I am making an assumption because it's such a commonplace thing for any woman or any girl to have experienced these kinds of things. And so Jessica Bakeman wrote a really good and compelling essay, if you will, in the New York Magazine. I will link to that too. The title of it is Cuomo Never Let Me Forget I Was a Woman. This is the Albany reporter. She was an Albany reporter and was on the beat for or reporting on Andrew Cuomo for 3 years. And it's her accounts of Cuomo's history of sexual harassment. And the word sexual is always problematic to me because, as you've just heard me say, dear listener, sex is not a part of the equation here. One thing I really wished I had asked Natalie was about the use of the word sex and sexual. And if I remember correctly, I don't think she used that word very often at all, if at all, during the nearly 1 hour that we spoke for. And the next time, and I will certainly have her back on again, invite her back, because I just thought that we have to do this. We have to. I know people talk about conversations and we've got to have them. It's this education that we must continue. And you know what? It never stops for any of us. Even people who like to think that they are really on top of this in terms of their awareness, their self-awareness, and the kinds of things they do to try to make areas comfortable for people like myself. There's still work to do. We're all learning. I'm learning. There's so much more I've got to do, you know? And that's the attitude I think that people should have, is that you don't get satisfied with, well, I'm this or I do this or I do that. As I said last week during those 2 episodes that I did regarding Sarah Everard, it's you never stop learning in this life, in this world. And if you are arrogant enough to think that you know it all, you do end up having a rude awakening. And so that's the thing, we all, speaking of this reflection and I think self-reflection as well for a few minutes, that's the thing that I think is very, very important, is that we are able to not settle in any area of our lives and do the work. And Natalie talked about doing the work, and that scenario that she offered that I've just repeated a few minutes ago of saying either the easy thing, which many people do say without thinking in a way. Oh, he seemed like such a nice guy. Oh, he's fine. He's not and they rush to defend this guy versus you. And they know you better than they know him. And it may have happened to you, dear listener. Someone in your family is defending the abuser or the rapist. And all of a sudden you feel so cold. Your blood curdles to ice. And your family members talking about how great he is? What about me, your daughter? Me, your son? What about me? And that happens a lot in families. And I pointed that out with this isolation, and Natalie had talked about that too. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I want to say about this too is with all of these powerful men, and also let me never forget the documentary that Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering did called On the Record, that chronicled black women being raped, attacked by black men in the record industry. Russell Simmons, L.A. Reid, and a number of others who are very powerful men. So again, this goes across race backgrounds of race. This is about male power. I mean, yes, as I've said before, it's a straight white male patriarchy. But that doesn't mean there aren't straight black men that participate in this. It doesn't mean that there aren't straight Latinos that participate in this. And it doesn't mean that there aren't others that do. And also, by the way, there are men who are gay who participate in this. Women who are gay who participate in this, who are in power, who do these abusive things under the umbrella of a straight white male patriarchy. I mean, look at Kevin Spacey, for example, and look at the excuses that he offered. Excuses. He said, well, I'm gay and can you imagine that you, as a gay man, would actually say, in response to all of these allegations about you, this, I forgot the guy's name, is Patrick or whatever his name was, who a few years back had said, on a couch, Kevin Spacey forced himself on me and did this and did the other and the other. And I swear this statement's true. It's basically an affidavit or whatever it was he put out there and told a story. And Kevin Spacey says, well, I'm gay, and doesn't take any accountability for his violence, for his actions, and offers excuses. Just like this guy. Well, I'll play the audio for you in a little while. That police chief or whatever the heck he was down there in Atlanta or Atlanta area a couple of days ago, absolutely despicable. I will play for you what he said. There is no excuse for murdering 8 people. And by the way, coming to find out now that 2 of them were white people as well on top of this. Well, not on top of, but coming to find out that there were 6 Asian women who were killed and 2 white people apparently. Any death, any life taken is a life that should still be with us. It's too many lives that have been taken. And this is still a hate crime. Even if there are, listen to me, no matter who has been killed, if you've got 6 Asian women who have been killed, that's a hate crime. It's also a crime of misogyny as well, and a crime of, killing women. Femicide, isn't that it? Femicide, I think, is the term. It's a homicide, it's femicide, it's killing women. It's these are all part of the crimes. These are all different crimes. And so offering excuses, that's what guilty people do the best, isn't it? Offer excuses for their murderous rampage or their raping someone, or isn't that what the culture does? That's what a death culture does. Offer excuses and tell women that they should wear longer skirts or they should cover themselves up. There are religions that do this. And then stone those same women to death if there's a mere suspicion of some. I mean, doesn't that happen across cultures and across, I don't even want to get into religion because then again it becomes a really thorny thing. So I will stay away from it. But we're living in that, right? We're living in that. And again, I think what I'm trying to say as I swim through this, however, I don't know, choppy the waters become, is that this is what a society does. This is what a culture of patriarchy and a society and systems do. They create the excuses and the rationales, which is what Natalie Collins talked about yesterday. And the other thing is that all this focus on the powerful men, it's important, but yet it does a disservice to all the anonymous men. Rather, let me rephrase that. It does a disservice to all of the people who have been abused that we don't know about. That might be you listening to me right now. That might be your friend. That might be your spouse. That might be your parent. That might be whomever it might be in your life, if not yourself, who has been abused, right? And all the focus is on Woody Allen and on Harvey Weinstein and on Bill Cosby and on R. Kelly and I'm not here saying Andrew Cuomo and Charlie Rose and Matt Lauer and Donald Trump and I'm not here suggesting or saying you can add Joe Biden to this list too. I mean, look at all of the issues with Joe Biden and the women that came forward against him, remember? And of course, Tara Reid, who again, I will maintain this to the very end, that I believe that Joe Biden raped Tara Reid. I will say that forever. I think that's very true. And yet I voted for him. So, again, I've got to examine my own sense of complicity in there, And in that's work that has to be done. And that's the kind of thing that I think Natalie Collins was hitting on, was aiming at, was getting at yesterday. Such an important conversation, really important. And not to say that the conversations I have with people who come on as guests for this podcast to talk to you and I aren't important. They all are. I just really believe that people have to listen to that one again if they have, or if they haven't, you've got to listen to Natalie Collins yesterday's episode. She, gender justice specialist, a term she admits that she completely made up, but it sounds like a term that really is, I think is a really good term, and it's been around forever because we need gender justice specialists to really break these things down and then to urge us and push us to act as she did yesterday, donate money to women's organizations and charities. And I put a number of them in the liner notes of the episode yesterday. I'm sure you saw them if you read through the episode liner notes, especially if you listen to this podcast on Apple or Spotify. And there's a couple of other platforms where the liner notes are very clear, so you can see them clearly. There are other platforms that this podcast is on, great platforms, but they condense all of the written information and the links get all smushed up. And so you cannot really properly make and distinguish them out because there's no spacing between what's written. It's all jumbled and pushed together. But if you follow this podcast and listen to it on Spotify or Apple or a few others, you will clearly see the delineations. And so you can see the links. And I link to all of those women's organizations that offer safe harbor for women, offer education to women and to men, not only women, but to men as well. There's Planned Parenthood with education, not just the services for women, but for men also. The Women's Aid Organization in England and the UK, Women's Rights Collective, a women's organization, I believe it's called the WRC, yep. All of those things, all of those organizations and more, get in touch with them. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at thehotline.org. Very important organizations, and their phone number, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, which is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week number. If you or someone you know is suffering this abuse, going through something, you're not safe at home because you've got a very violent man in your midst, and you don't know what to do, and you're living under constant fear, please, if you're in the United States, please consult that hotline as safely as you can. I'm actually going to put that phone number and hotline in again on this episode as well. It's also in yesterday's episode, liner notes, but I want to put it again in this because, again, I've spent the first half hour of this podcast episode today talking about these things, and I always think it's very important to offer a phone number, a web page, if you can, because some people don't have internet access. Some people may not even have phones. I mean, and there's no phone booth anymore, is there? You know, once upon a time, you could actually go and make a phone call in a phone booth in the United States. I think you still can. I mean, there's probably still places in the UK where you can, I think, but maybe not. Because I remember going to, I think they've ended that too in the UK. Because I went to, when I was in Westminster, in central London, about 3 years ago now. And I went inside the phone booth, but it was not working. So I think that's the case everywhere now. There's no place really on the street to make a phone call. So you can't do that, you know? So, and if you don't have a phone, somehow there's got to be a way, I think, that you can get some help if you can. So I'm going to put that phone number in, and I don't remember it at the moment, but I will put it in the liner notes for people in the United States who know of people or who are having their own ordeal with a very violent person in their household. So that's why the messaging from the pandemic, remember early on people were saying, stay at home, and staying at home saves lives. Well, yeah, but if you are in an abusive marriage or abusive partnership or relationship, no, it does not. It makes you even more vulnerable because you've got this violent person who is marauding through your home and you do not feel safe at home. So staying at home is the last thing you want to do. I mean, and by the way, I do want to kind of pivot here before going to a quick break, is to push where that last point was that I made, that saying stay at home is problematic when you've got an abusive man in your household. And I want to push that along to homelessness, because homelessness, people say, well, why wouldn't people go to shelters? Why won't homeless people go to these shelters? It's the same kind of methodology. I'm not comparing, for God's sakes. What I'm saying is that sometimes the very spaces, here's my point. I hope I'm making it clearly. What I'm saying is that some places that the larger society, you, me, the people who are not homeless, I should say, presumably, think are safe for homeless people are the very places that are not. Just as people in domestic violence situations, and maybe some of us say insensitive things like stay at home during this pandemic, and not even give a thought to, well, you know, by the way, there's many millions of someones, the vast majority of them women, being abused and battered by their partner inside the home. That's not really a good message to send, is it? Stay at home during a pandemic when you really are not safe at home at all. And so that reflects a whole nother thing about the culture and about the people who frame these messages and don't think about the women who cannot afford to stay at home. And the same thing applies with the homeless. Many of us who've never experienced homelessness think, well, oh my goodness, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't homeless people want to stay in a shelter? Well, the reason why they wouldn't want to is because it's not safe. because you have all of these shenanigans going on, violent shenanigans going on in homeless shelters. So the people who are homeless would feel safer and feel safer on the streets, which is why you and I see homeless people on the streets. That's why they're there. But the reason why they're there is the conditions of the system and the violence of poverty, the failure of a society to take care of its most vulnerable, the failure and calculated failure. That's what the system is. It's working very well, thank you very much. And that's the system at work. The system deliberately not giving a safety net to people who fall. The system deliberately not in advance providing all of these things for us, for the general health and well-being of a society. That's the system at work when it refuses to do that, but at the very same time gives billionaires and trillionaires tax cuts without a moment's thought. And all of this debate and shenanigans and a filibuster, which we've got to abolish, all of this crap over the last few weeks and months to get another stimulus package for the everyday person in America. Oh my God. I mean, seriously, folks. Don't you think we can do better than this? Don't you think we should do better? I think we should do better. Same thing with the vaccines, vaccinations. I'll play you that sound as well. There's two pieces of sound that I'm going to play to you. One of them on the theme of what I said throughout the first half hour, and I mentioned about excuses that get made for violent people, for violent men especially, for violent white men in particular, also violent black men, but particularly violent white men, whether they're powerful or not. I'm going to play those two pieces of sound coming up right after this.
Anti-Asian crime surged by nearly 150% in 2020. And we know the increase spiked throughout the pandemic. And we know just yesterday, Trump went on hate TV and spewed his anti-Asian hateful COVID slur. And he did it again to deflect blame for the virus that he chose to let spread across our country. Now, here's what we don't know. We do not know if this massacre at spas in Georgia that killed 8, including 6 Asian women, was racially motivated.
This is still early, but he does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue, what he considers a sex addiction, and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, and it's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? This is what I talk about, dear listener, when I talk about the excuses that we make as a society. And that, well, first of all, you heard Chris Cuomo. Oh, dear me, that I even play a Cuomo's voice on these podcast waves is, well, especially after everything that's happened. I spent the first half hour plus talking about his brother. But and I don't watch the corporate news media anymore, except when if I see these things on Twitter, that is watching it, obviously. If there's a video, a CNN video that someone tweets out, that is, you've seen it. So you are watching it in that way. But I don't ever sit down to watch anything on CNN or MSNBC or any of these networks. Fox, forget about it. That's not even on the radar. But my whole point is that was Wednesday evening on Chris Cuomo's show. And I want to thank the podcaster Katie Halper for that, at KTHALPS on Twitter. She does a really good show there on her podcast, not on Twitter, but there's clips of it, I'm sure, on Twitter. I know are on Twitter. But really good show that she does. So I want to thank her. And also Ben Horst, who goes by the name at Moria Marmalade, which is a really great Twitter handle. Moria Marmalade. That's Marmalade. He's the person that actually posted that clip on Twitter in Katie Halper's responses. And so that's how I procured that clip. But I want to give credit where credit is due. So thank you to both of you for that. This is the thing, right? This is the problem. Again, I talked about the excuse making. And again, I go back to Natalie Collins again yesterday on this podcast when she talked about this and the excuses that we make and the culture and the patriarchy and the system, right? This system that allows the homeless to even be a homeless in the first place, because there are these mechanisms deliberately not put in place, right? So that the richest are able to get by very comfortably, more than comfortably, in excess of comfortable. And then the rest of us are not in that position. If we had a fair and just society, we would have everybody doing well, or at least being comfortable. Not everybody having to be uber rich. That's not what I'm advocating. And I'm not saying that rich people should not be rich. What I'm saying is that we need to have an equitable, and I hate that word, but it's a word that is a real word. We have to have resources shared out amongst all of us. And some people would call that socialism. Some people would call that democratic socialism. But capitalism does not do that. Capitalism does not share all the resources. Capitalism is a mechanism by which you have to literally crush somebody, figuratively and perhaps literally, to get to your economic promised land. It's, well, again, I go back again to, this is such an important episode yesterday with Natalie Collins, when she made the statement about having a woman buying a woman's sexual services, so to speak. God, I can't put that. I don't know how else to put it, right? When you're talking about the sex worker industry and how she said she wanted to abolish, that she's an abolitionist. She wants to abolish the sex worker industry. And she said that like nobody who, I'm giving away the whole episode, but she said, nobody can claim that it is, I'm paraphrasing, that this is a completely duress-free, duress, D-R-U-E-S-S, duress-free situation, and can't claim that that's the case when a man's paying for services, because that is the man's sense of ownership of this woman. And so that woman, therefore, is not being at all, she's not autonomous. Because even if, and I'll add this because I don't think Natalie said this, even if she goes into that sex worker industry, because that gives her the money she needs to put food on the table for her children, because there's no father involved. There you go, an absence of a male figure, right? Even if she does that, when it comes to the transactional aspect of this, the man believes that his money entitles him to not only abuse but kill a woman. And that's what Natalie said yesterday. That's pretty much exactly what Natalie Collins said on this podcast here yesterday. And I mean, can't argue with her. I can't disagree with that. Really. And for all we say about agency, which is extremely important, I'm 100% behind that. Look at where the agency is being cultivated in a system that already oppresses women. And so I think that's the point that Natalie was making was, I think that's what I understood her to be saying. And so, so that's the thing. And here again is this video. I've got this audio. Listen to this again.
Motivated.
This is still early, but he does claim that it was not racially motivated. He apparently has an issue, what he considers a sex addiction, and sees these locations as something that allows him to go to these places, and it's a temptation for him that he wanted to eliminate.
That was Jay Baker, a sheriff, I believe, at the Cherokee police chief. Good grief. In I guess, or at the Atlanta area. And that's what he said on Wednesday, the day after this execution of 6 Asian women and 2 other people. Oh, he wanted to go to these places. This is a police chief, a sheriff, giving cover to a white male 21-year-old murderer. Oh, he believed. Wait a minute. Did they do that with the exonerated 5? Did you remember, New Yorkers or anyone else listening? Did you remember, dear listener, the police chief, the mayor, the district attorney's office? Do you remember any of them giving a press conference saying, well, the exonerated 5, those 16 and 14 and 13-year-old boys, they decided they were bored. They wanted to, and of course they're all exonerated and they're innocent. They never did anything to Patricia Miley in Central Park. But did you hear any press conference in 1989, April of that year? That's almost 32 years ago now. April the 19th, 1989. Did you, in April 20th as well, the day after it, this horrible attack happened, and the day after, this heinous hunting down of these men as well, these boys. They're boys. Did you hear any police chief, Benjamin Ward, who I think was the New York City police chief at the time, if it wasn't Lee Brown, I think it was Benjamin Ward. Did you hear Benjamin Ward or any of the people there at the time in New York sit there and say, well, these 5 boys, they were just bored, and, they believed that an outlet, maybe attacking a jogger, would be a good thing, and they believed that would provide that situation because they were bored and they were addicted to wanting to do. But you just heard it. I've played it twice now. That's a police chief. That's a sheriff telling you, well, we believe he said he has a sex addiction. That is just despicable that you've got that. But is it surprising? No, that is the equivalent of the Burger King defense. I bet you. Does anybody know whether or not that police chief or any other police who arrested that 21-year-old excuse for a man? He's not a man. He is a man, but he's a piece of garbage. And he's a murderer is what he is. That's what you start calling him. I know, innocent until proven guilty. I know. But that's not afforded to everybody, is it? Like those 5 exonerated young boys. When everybody in the world but their parents and me and some of you believed in their innocence. And, everybody else in the media were, including Donald Trump as well, was saying, put nooses around him and bring the death penalty back here and bring the police. We want more police. Yeah, we want more police like this idiot that's talking about enabling violence against women and enabling murder. Great. Oh, he had a sex addiction. So that's got something to, so that makes it any less better, does it? That makes it a little less, not as bad now because it's a sex addiction. What? There's lots of people in the world who have sex addictions. A lot of people have sex addictions. And they don't all go around murdering women of any group, murdering anybody. And they don't target Asian women. They don't do any targeting because they don't kill anybody. They don't even target a person. They stay addicted. And nobody cares about that. It's like this, what these folks do. These people always use excuses and never are responsible for their behavior. And they're busy. These white men, busy telling all of us, You've got to be responsible, especially telling black folk. You got to be responsible. You got to be responsible. If you're going to be a parent, you got to be responsible. And look at the monsters that these parents have. This guy and this police chief. Oh, he had a sex addiction, did he now? So that justifies him blowing away 6 Asian women, 6 women, and killing 2 other people because he had a sex addiction. That is the Burger King defense. Did they buy Burger King for this guy when they arrested him? Did these cops do that? I want to know. I really want to know. That's the Burger. I mean, that's literally the guy, this police chief down there in Cherokee, the Cherokee police chief. That's literally him saying to the guy in custody, hey, I'll buy you Burger King. That is a system protecting people, protecting white men. That's what that is. That's what it is. It's nothing else but that. Hey, come on now. Let's be honest. It's despicable. Disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. Excuses, excuses, excuses.
Today, 65% of people aged 65 or older have received at least 1 shot.
Despite the progress, a new CDC report puts Californians our state among the 5 worst states for vaccine supply. According to data from mid-December and February, the state is vaccinating wealthier residents at higher rates than the most vulnerable. Since then, Governor Newsom has released a new equity plan, which gives extra vaccines to vulnerable communities.
That was from San Francisco's ABC News 7 yesterday, Thursday, March the 18th, 2021. You heard the voice of the newscaster there. I believe it was Kristen Z. Not 100% sure, but I believe it was. And the person you obviously heard as well was President Biden, Joe Biden, President of the United States, talking about the accomplishment so far of the vaccination program, which I think has been good, but it hasn't been good enough because, as you heard in the report there are people in this state of California, and I dare say the state you live in if you live in the United States, and I dare say wherever you are in the world, who haven't yet received the vaccinations. And there are lots of countries, and I want to say this with a lot of context or some context. There are lots of countries where only about 10% of the people in the country are being vaccinated. 90% of the people in a lot of the poorer countries around the world have not been vaccinated. And so the COVAX program is a foundation, confederation of organizations and doctors and people who are trying to get resources to these countries where poor people are in desperate need of the vaccine, of the vaccination. And so there's a lot of work being done to improve that rate, which I think is really important. And I'm glad they're doing such good, important work. Professor Beate Kampmann was on this podcast last month, and she talked a little bit about COVAX. Really important group they are. And so that's really important. And also, again, where a system deliberately fails people who are not rich. You heard it. You heard what Kristen said there in that audio. Oh, the rich, and I'm paraphrasing now. Actually, I'll read the quote. The state is vaccinated. This is about California, the state that I'm in here. So what I'm about to say is about what California is doing. Quote, this is from the broadcast yesterday, the piece of audio you just heard from the news broadcast here in San Francisco yesterday. The state is vaccinating wealthier residents at higher rates than the most vulnerable. End quote. That's what it is. That's what the system does. It makes sure that the rich are covered and protected. It makes sure that the PPP for these businesses, remember that whole thing last year where the PPP, the Payment Protection Program, for all of these businesses that was supposed to be going to small businesses, the mom and pop stores and all of those kinds of small businesses. And yet none of those small businesses got a dime. And all of that money, millions and millions of dollars of it, went to mega business, Uber business, big business, Shake Shack, the Los Angeles Lakers, and all these other multi-billion-dollar companies and organizations got all this money. You want to talk about slush funds? These Republicans getting up there a few days and weeks ago who didn't want this $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan bill to pass, getting up there talking about this is a Democrat slush fund. These Republicans saying Democrat slush fund, Democrat slush. What is a slush fund if it ain't what we saw last year with this PPP? All these billions and billions and billions and millions of dollars going to these uber rich companies. They didn't need that money and they were shamed into returning it. They didn't say, no, thank you very much, Mr. Mnuchin, who was then the Treasury Secretary. No, thank you very much. We don't want this money. They didn't say that. They took the money. And then when reporters did the digging and exposed their backsides, exposed their ass, then they said, oh, we're going to return it, making these statements like they were statements of being magnanimous. And they're returning the money like they were doing some grand gesture, grandiloquent gesture. I mean, they didn't refuse it in the first place, though, did they now? And that's the thing. All the tax cuts to billionaires, all the tax cuts to the wealthiest, and all of the breaks that the rich get. That's all system. That's all what the system does because it's created by those individuals. So they're going to make sure that it is, going to take care of them. Doesn't make it right. It is not right. Meanwhile, you've got people who need this vaccination, still haven't got it yet here in California, still haven't got vaccinated. And the rich people jumping the line. If I were a rich person, I would not be broadcasting my vaccination. I know that people do it as a public service to encourage others to get it, and they do this. So that part is good. But, oh, gosh, it also seems a little bit tone deaf when the vast majority of the rest of us have not received this vaccination, I should say, or, the vast majority of people have not. And so for the people who haven't received the vaccination, these videos of celebrities or politicians saying, well, hi, it's effective, it's safe, get your vaccine, get your vaccination. And they're looking at some of them at you, or you are looking at them going, because not that you're jealous, but you're pissed off at them. Because, you're sitting there waiting. You still don't have your vaccine yet. You're still months away from having yours, or you're weeks away. Meanwhile, you've got rich people jumping the line in Los Angeles and elsewhere, all over the country. And the other part is, which I didn't mention, and you heard it on that report, is that the vaccine supply is running low. Actually, I don't think you heard that on that report I just played. But the fact is, like in every state in the United States and in England as well, the vaccine supply is running low. Surprise, surprise. The vaccine supply in California running low. Surprise, surprise. Well, look at who got the vaccine. I mean, I guarantee you there's no glitch in the system for the rich. I guarantee you that. There's no vaccine supply shortage there. There's no vaccination supply shortage for the rich. I mean, most of the people who are rich and affluent got this vaccine in January, got this vaccine in December. I mean, honestly, that's the truth. And I mean, all the people who appeared at the inauguration of President Biden and Vice President Harris, 2 months ago, almost exactly 2 months ago. Tomorrow will be the 2-month mark, the first day of spring, since they were inaugurated, exactly 2 months ago tomorrow. When you saw that exactly 2 months ago tomorrow, but when you saw it back on January 20th, 2021, you saw all of these people hugging each other, these celebrities and politicians and hugs, and A-Rod and Jennifer Lopez, no longer together, who were there, they were smiling and probably putting a good face on things. And all of that, and Jennifer Lopez performed, I think, I remember, and Lady Gaga did, and of course remember Amanda Gorman, and all of these people, and the celebrities were hugging and this and that, and they all were vaccinated. This is January, so they were all vaccinated. All of them were. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to be doing that and not have a mask on. I didn't see too many masks on that stage. I mean, there were people with masks on, but I don't, they were just hugging and all that. They were hugging each other and hugs. And it's so insensitive to everybody else in the country and around the world who's watching all of that. And nowhere near getting a vaccine. Nowhere near, rather, getting a vaccination. Nowhere near. And that's the thing, right? That's the arrogance of it. It's the arrogance of those kinds of things. And the system protects the rich. It allows the rich to get involved in college cheating scandals, the celebritydom. Get involved in college cheating scandals. I'll pay you $50,000 to get my child into this school. And that's how it's gone for centuries. And it involves people who know somebody. It involves the sons or daughters of powerful men, white male politicians, powerful white male politicians. We can get Johnny into Yale. We can get George W. into Yale. We can get him into Harvard to do an MBA. We can get him in to do this, get him in to do that. Because I'm George Poppy Bush. I mean, that's how these guys get in. You want to talk about affirmative action. That's affirmative action. That's affirmative action. And that's the affirmative action that people either don't want to look at, forget, pretend to forget. And they call it nepotism instead, right? Which it is. But they call it these nice sounding or not so nice sounding words that somehow are nicer sounding than affirmative action, because that sounds so scary to some people. Ooh, affirmative action. Oh my God. Because we've only had a 500-year head start over you, black folk. And so, we should have that 500-year head start continue. And you're affirmative action. Ooh, you got in here from affirmative action. Ooh, yeah, you. And what you should be telling them is, when a white person says that to you, what you should be telling them is, you had a 500-year head start. And you still are fucking up. Been fucking up. And you still can't get your shit together. And you have a 500-year head start. I wonder how many, what kind of response and how many fights you'd get into. Or how much money you'd make for every time you'd have to say that to the next ignorant person that said that kind of bullcrap to you about, ooh, affirmative action, I don't like you, you're getting an advantage. Motherfuckers have motherfuckers have a 500-year advantage head start over you. They're in the year 2000, you're in 1500. They're in the year 2021, you're in frickin' 1621. Just getting off the friggin' boats that you were brought here in chains on from 1619, Jamestown. Shut up. Excuse me, that was 400 years. My math is off. So 1521, you were brought, and then you were brought here in 1619, if not earlier. 400 bloomin' years. 402. Shut up. Affirmative action so bad. Ooh. But this one over here where you've got the rich person with the 500-year head start, the ill-gotten gains, where did that money come from? And no, he didn't make it alone. No one does. So where did that money come from? The gold rush. Where did that money come from? Shut up. Where did that money come from? Give me a break. Oh, the gold rush. And they settled. Where did that money come from? There were Mexicans here. There were Native Americans here. Spanish. Come on, where did the money come from? Oh, but in the gold rush, we settled. And, ooh, yeah, did you? Did you now? Did you kill anybody to get that money that wasn't yours, that gold? Oh, please. People, you have to read your history. Study your history. I'm telling you. I mean, you may not care about any of this, but let's not pretend that someone white came here and had all these solutions for everything. I'm being brutally honest because you've got to look at the history. And if it were a black person that were doing all these kinds of things, I'd be saying the same thing. If you had black folk colonizing America, I'd be pointing the same thing out. It's not who it is, it's what it is. And that's the reality. And I hate to say it, and I'm not saying it is what it is. I'm saying that this is the history. And you can't run from it. You can't. The Queen of England, the crown jewels, where do they come from? Huh? Where do they come from? I'm telling you, the African continent is where they were stolen from. And there's blood on them. I mean, no one wants to look at that, though. At least some people don't. How does all this wealth get amassed? And the most vulnerable and the poor not getting this vaccination yet. Those are the first people, apart from the elderly, apart from the healthcare worker, apart from the grocery store worker, any of those workers who are the quote-unquote essential workers, apart from all of them getting their vaccinations, what about the poor? Shouldn't you be taking care of the poor first, in addition to those groups I just mentioned? Why were the poor not even, it's a rhetorical question, not even considered? In California, we talk about this all the time out here. Oh, it's the 5th or 6th most richest economy in the world. And look what we're doing to the poorest people in our state. Look what we're doing to them. No vaccinations. Oh, and I almost said it again, Governor Newsom. Gavin Newsom. Governor Newsom has now put something into place to alleviate that. Why wasn't that put in place at the beginning? It's like as if to say that, and again, I do not support this recall. I want to make that very clear. You may have been aware in the news in the last few days of this recall, and it is Republican-led, but even if it was democratically led, it doesn't matter. We've got to get away from R and D. It's about right and wrong, not Republicans, Democrats, even though that's what's going on, of course, as well. But that's still under the umbrella of right and wrong. And this effort led by all of these toxic people who do vote Republican is all about trying to gain power. It's a complete power grab. None of these people were looking at trying to impeach Trump. None of them. But, the California governor? We got to get rid of him. And I know Gavin Newsom has not done things up to snuff in a lot of areas. Up to snuff, oh geez. I really try to be conscious of what I say. But it does take work. And you have to decide whether you want to do the work or not. And everybody makes that choice one way or the other. But I do want to say, Gavin Newsom has not performed his job as governor in the best way. I think he's been very good in some areas, but again, this pandemic has not been one of them. And he would admit that to you. He has admitted that early on. He admitted that a few months ago. And then in a State of the State speech he gave last week, much more upbeat. There were some good things he was doing, but let's not give Gavin Newsom this big pat on the back for something that should have been done and that he should have done and his office should have done well before this pandemic happened. If we here in California are the 5th or 6th richest economy on the planet, then why in the hell didn't we prevent this vaccine shortage, this vaccine supply shortage? Why? Why was it that the rich were able, this is again a rhetorical question, why was it that the rich were able to get this access right away? It's obvious what the answer is. It's a rhetorical question. And the poor weren't. If you're this great state, and I love California, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be better in this state, though, including the end to these attacks. But if you are against Asians, against anyone, but especially against Asian people, but if you are this 5th or 6th richest economy, how the hell couldn't you have had vaccinations for the poorest people in the state and done that right away, along with the healthcare workers, along with the people who are 65 and above? Why couldn't they have been taken care of first? And the rich, who don't go anywhere or go whenever they want to go someplace, why didn't they get left till last? Isn't that what a society is supposed to do? Look out for its most poorest and most vulnerable individuals and communities first? Isn't that the first order of a civilized society, is supposed to protect the most vulnerable people in it and do so right away? Protect everybody, but the most vulnerable especially should be safeguarded and taken care of and welcomed. I want to talk about welcoming, and I want to talk about, again, the notion that we have got to do better in this country, especially in terms of welcoming Asian people. It's coming up next.
There is also a GoFundMe set up for Not Fam, the man attacked on Market Street yesterday. You can find it at our website, abc7news.com. Larry and Alma.
So, Dion, you and I have been talking about this situation behind the scenes for a while now. People may be surprised to hear how many videos you get every day, and a lot of these crimes are going unreported. Is that why families are speaking out now?
Yeah, because, Larry, they are like me. They are fed up. They are angry. They say Asian Americans have been attacked for far too long, and it is time that the world pays attention so something will change. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but this is what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I mean, the son of the man who was attacked on Market Street yesterday, he told me he wants justice, and he said, quote, someone has got to stop this brutality and make sure my dad is the last victim. Whether or not that happens, we shall see, but at the rate things are going, Larry and Alma, it is excruciating to cover and to absorb that this is happening in our community.
Yeah, and we know how hard it has been for you, Dion, having to even speak about all these things, and for all the families out there dealing with this. I mean, it's just a horrific situation.
Yeah, it is a horrific situation. That was from San Francisco ABC 7 News yesterday. Saturday. What day is it? You've had that feeling for a year plus now. What day is it? I don't know. But let's get back to some serious issues here. And that was actually yesterday, Thursday, March the 18th, 2021, from San Francisco, ABC 7 News. And you heard the voice of Dion Lim. She is one of the anchors and reporters. She is a reporter on ABC 7 News here in San Francisco, California. And you heard her really telling you, and she talked about she was being emotional. But doesn't matter, emotional or not, you know, have your feelings around this. We all should be feeling this way about what happened on Tuesday night here in the United States, down in Atlanta, the Atlanta area. We should all feel this way. And I know that those of you listening do. The 8 lives were taken like this, so violently, you know. And, you know, this 6 Asian women, 6 women, brutally ended like this. This is evil. Murdering people. It's just evil. And enough is enough. And that's Dion Lim. And I agree. Asian women have been targeted. Asian people overall. These attacks continue here in San Francisco. Oh, yes, they do. I don't know if I told you, but I'll say it now. A day or two ago, a 75-year-old Asian woman was attacked. So a white guy attacked her. And she responded by whipping his ass. Sent his ass to the hospital. I think she had to go there too for some treatment because he attacked her. And then all I had to hear was someone on a local news station. It wasn't ABC7, it was KPIX5. The sports guy who happened to be jogging in the area. And he's sitting there, Dennis O'Donnell is his name, and he's sitting there on the cameras. Oh, well, talking to one of his colleagues who's doing the story, and he's saying on the street, well, I was jogging and I saw this woman, and from what I saw, it was like she wanted to have more of him. She wanted to attack that guy some more while he was on the stretcher. Well, yeah. I mean, as if you're painting her as the bad person. She was attacked. This is self-defense. And she was angry. And I bet you she's been attacked before. 77 years old, actually. Not 70. 77. There's a GoFundMe page up for her. I think John Chen is the person. You can Google or whatever. Search John Chen, C-H-E-N. John-Chen. GoFundMe for his grandmother. And it's an authentic page. Go donate to that page. But, I mean, again, what Dion Lim, the reporter there, was saying is that she gets videos every day. You heard the voice of Larry Beale, who is a local, he used to be a sportscaster. He's now a full-time news guy. Larry Beale and Armor Dates, who you heard at the end there, saying it's a shocking and horrific and it's just horrible. And we all have to feel that sense of outrage. And when a black person is killed and murdered, we have to all feel that sense of outrage. And obviously, last summer, people did all over this country and around the world. I wonder how the people now are feeling. And I wonder if they still feel outraged about what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all of the black people that you've already forgotten about. And maybe I can think of all the names. I can't remember all the names. But there's some that I won't remember because there's so many. And that's what we've got to end that there's any of us being killed in any way, shape, or form. That includes with gun violence in the communities. Gun violence. That's got to end as well, where some young brother has decided to resolve a dispute by killing another brother, killing a sister. And I'm talking about in any community, because there's gun violence in white communities, gun violence in all these communities. Native, everybody's good, this is really horrible. And this is the kind of thing. And on what the society does against Asian individuals. I'm telling you, the society and the rhetoric, not only the guy that left the White House, who was the leader of a terrorist attack against the U.S. Capitol 2 months ago, but also the guy that's presently in the White House. Some of his rhetoric around China. And I get it. Yes, you do have to, at one point, speak about your policies with China. But that really contributes, doesn't it? I mean, and then the media and how it perpetuates this and perpetrates it and then hypersexualizes Asian women. That's something we did not talk about yesterday, Natalie and myself. We didn't, but that's another thing. When you've got a culture that hypersexualizes women, and in this case particularly hypersexualizes Asian women as playthings, as dolls, as toys, as all of these things that damage, that really give men this idea that it is okay to do these things to women. And it is not okay. It is never okay to violate a woman, a girl, or anyone. It is never okay. Never. And that's the thing. And these so-called excuses. Oh, well, he had a sex addiction. Also, it's okay for him to kill 6 women and kill 2 other people. We've got to stop that garbage. That language that says that if Mike Tyson walked up to his hotel room and Desiree Washington was walking with him, that Desiree Washington, oh, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? Oh, it's 3 a.m. So that means it's okay then? She knew what she was getting into? I heard women saying that. I heard black women saying that. I heard some white women saying that. It was, well, she knew what she was getting up to. Some black women saying that stuff back in 1991 and 1990 when the revelations came out in 91 or 90. And then, you know, that Miss Indiana or whatever, she had won this contest, Desiree Washington, and they all turned against her. And the black men, some of the black men did, many of them turned against the sister, and they were all getting up there going, Desiree Washington's this and that. She's a sellout. She betrayed our brother. I'm like, shut the you know what. Are you serious? But that was going on in some parts of the black community, blaming Desiree Washington. And Mike Tyson was found guilty of rape. Oh, she's a sellout. And that's what we do to each other, some of us in our community. It's what we do. Blaming the woman, blaming the sister, and not taking the responsibility to stand up and examine ourselves as we defend these men. It's the same thing that Natalie was talking about yesterday. You've got to do that work. It's real easy and very dangerous, I might add, to turn around and go, oh no, he didn't do that. She must have imagined that shit. Very dangerous to go down that road. And we can't go down that road. And we've got to have a society that protects, but not just protects, because again, as I told Natalie, I'm all up for protecting women, but it's got to be about educating boys, as she said. And as I say, it's got to be about educating men. It's got to be about welcoming people, not just doing the safeguarding at the end of this, after the event happens and after the rape happens, God forbid. And I don't mean to speak so casually about that. I really apologize for speaking about it as if it's a casual part of a run-on sentence that I'm speaking, because I take these things extremely seriously, dear listener. What I am saying is that we have to have a welcoming culture so that you welcome Asian people in the first place, instead of sticking signs up down the street in San Francisco about no hate, no bias. Well, what if you had taken the time in the first place to welcome Asian people, bring Asian people into the culture, instead of looking at them as this group of, the racist stereotype. Oh, the super smart person. Oh, she's really hot and sexy. This is what the culture has done. And it has allowed and enabled people who already hate, like this 21-year-old, to do these things. He is acting on his own volition, but he's also acting within a system, within a society that has given him permission to do these things. This is what Natalie talked about again yesterday. And I'm saying that this is what's going on with this situation. We've got to create a welcoming climate. and not just do the remedial work after someone has been attacked, after yet another Asian person has been attacked. Then we're all doing the remedial stuff at the end and the GoFundMe pages, and we're helping and we're sending our messages of love and support. Why didn't we do that before? You know what I mean? Like, why didn't we do that before, when this wasn't happening, or at least years ago when it was happening but wasn't getting headlines? Why didn't we do that? Why didn't governors and mayors and city council persons and congresspeople and presidents and senators, and why didn't they all be part? Why? I mean, they may have been, but I'm not aware of it. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. But what I'm trying to say is, why wasn't there this overture of, why wasn't there this welcoming culture in our society before these attacks, before these assassinations happened on Tuesday night? Why are we always doing the work at the end instead of at the beginning, is what I'm saying. And I think that once we start to answer those kinds of questions and we do the work, then we can begin to look at having a better society. Then we can begin to sit here proudly and talk about how great the country is. And there's lots of things about America that are really great and good. I'm not sitting here saying that there aren't. They certainly are. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I absolutely love the country for that reason and for others. It gives people these opportunities to do the things they couldn't do in other countries. All I am saying, dear listener, is that we can be far better if we really want to be. I am fed up with politicians who tell us, this is not who we are. Well, this is damn well who we are, and it's been who we are for hundreds of years. But again, because education in this country has been stripped in budget after budget after budget after president after president after president, especially in Republican administrations. And you have lousy education secretaries like Betsy DeVos, who had never set foot inside a public school. She, the billionaire that she is. Because you have that, you've got textbooks in places like Texas and everywhere else that completely erase things like, oh, there was enslavement in America. Oh, there was actually a Holocaust that happened in 1930s and 40s. They completely erase these things from their textbooks. And you got these numbnuts around here with Camp Auschwitz fucking shirts on. They know that this happened to Jewish people. They know that. Someone had that shirt on during that terrorist attack 2 months ago, but somebody printed that damn shirt. See, damn it. This is what I'm talking about, dear listener. Please stick with me for a moment here. The despicable piece of trash that had that shirt on as he was committing attacks on that Capitol in Washington, D.C., he's despicable. But what about the people who printed that damn shirt? Whether it was him or some company that printed that shirt, that T-shirt that had that despicable, I'm not going to repeat the two words, you heard me say them earlier, that despicable thing on the front of it. Seriously? You got to look at them too. You got to look at them. This is not done in isolation. And that is not to say that I'm letting these people off the hook, and I'm not letting that 21-year-old off the hook, or anybody, be they black, white, or I'm not letting them off the hook. I am saying there is also a society and a culture that gives these people license to do these things. When you've got a police chief down in Cherokee saying, oh, well, he had a sex addiction, you see. And so, yeah, this was like the place that he wanted to resolve his sexual tension. And so he went to these massage parlors. And he decided to deal with it that way, with a gun. A whole goddamn, this may as well have been his defense attorney talking. Was that his defense attorney, or was that the actual police chief of Cherokee? The sheriff, was that? I couldn't tell. Could you tell when you listened to that clip that I played twice earlier, whether it was the police chief or whether it was actually The boy's defense attorney talking to you. Could you tell? I mean, he had a funny looking suit on that had a kind of a badge on it and some shiny badge and yeah, you know. That's the enabling. That's the enabling. It's the same thing about you saying that you were abused and your uncle sitting across the street or sitting across the table from you going, oh, he was such a nice guy, that guy. Or your grandmother doing it, or your mother doing it. Or your sister or brother doing it. Oh, he was such a nice guy. And that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. Not, oh my God, this is so horrible. Right? Some of the reaction immediately is, oh, but he was such a nice guy, that guy. Was he? Again, I go back to Brett Kavanaugh and the million women that they found to say, oh my God, you know, this guy was so good, he never touched me. Same thing with Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas, there were women that said, oh no, I've worked with Clarence Thomas for many months now, and you know, he never laid a hand on me. He never spoke that kind of language to me. And then you don't call witnesses to defend Anita Hill, Joe Biden. And then a woman says that you raped her, Joe Biden. And then, you know, this week the Violence Against Women Act was put back in effect, as best as I remember, in the House of Representatives this week. We also had the ERA deadline extended. The time limit was taken off to achieve the ratification. And hopefully it'll go to the Senate. Hopefully both of these will. So that's another thing I want to talk about. Just mention those two things, because I didn't talk about those at all during this particular week so far. But that's a lot that I've left you with to think about, right? And I bet you've thought about all of this before. I hope. If you haven't, that's a whole menu of things, right, that your head might start to hurt over. But this is not about your head hurting. This is about, we've really got to face who we are and look at ourselves in the mirror. And the politicians have got to, as I said before, have got to stop saying this is not who we are. It's a violation of the soul and a violation of history. And it's really, you're really doing a gross educational disservice to everybody when you as a politician or anybody says this is not who we are. That's what happens when you don't reflect and look at who we actually are. When you don't look at history, when you ignore it and say, oh, that happened 150 years ago. Oh, that happened 85 years ago. Oh, you know. Something happened to you when you were 4 years old. And if that thing that happened to you at 4 years old was harmful, you ain't forgotten it, baby. You ain't forgotten. You've not forgotten that. So don't tell me about, oh, well, slavery was, the enslavement was, oh, that was in 1860s and in America. And that, well, that happened so long ago. No. It didn't happen so long ago. And the scars remain today. It's still in effect in some form today, when the wealth gap between black people and white people is so vast. Oh, please. Oh, my God. When less than 25% or so of black people own homes and more than 45% of white people do, or whatever it is, or 50%. Give me a break. But it happened so long ago. It's still happening. This is continuous. We've got to start looking at history as a continuum and not as something that happened way back when. And I think the culture promotes that, history being something that was ancient. Oh, ancient history. And this is live. These things affect everything. And where we are now is a reflection of where we were. And it's connected. It's like what James Baldwin always said, which was, if you don't know what happened before you, you don't know what's going on around you. And that is still true in 2021. It's still true right now. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.